I'm Allie Joseph, and this is Salon Talks. My guest today is actor-producer Billy Crudup, whose new 10-episode series dramedy, Hello Tomorrow, premieres Friday, February 17th on Apple TV+. The show is set in a retro future world of kind of clunky robots doing human tasks and centers around a group of traveling salesmen hawking lunar timeshares. Interesting, right? Welcome back to Salon, Billy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to talk about the show with you.
I'm glad, and we will talk about the show. But first, happy Valentine's Day. We're glad you decided to come back and visit us again. I know you don't love interviews, but you know they're the obligation that comes with the job, right? What is today?
I like them more and more.
You do. That's great. Why is that?
Yeah. Well, because I feel like you get to a little the things that I was worried about early in my career. You don't worry about so much when you get older, and so then it becomes a really nice experience to get to try to communicate with people about a piece of material that you love. So I'm in a much better place with the interviews these days.
That's good. You look very at ease. Not that you wouldn't, because
Thank you. Is this over because I'm very uncomfortable?
Last time we spoke for your movie After the Wedding, we talked about what motivates you for a role and why you would take it. So you said that you had to have a psychological or emotional connection to the character's journey. So what was your tie to Jack's story in particular?
Yeah, it's like you have to have some kind of end to them. And for me, the way that I experience it when I'm reading it is if I kind of pause and start to daydream and imagine the way the person is moving in the world, then I know that I've got some kind of intuitive end to the character. And this guy, Jack, reminded me so much of my father and my father's sense of optimism that I thought I understood a primary feature of the character that gave me that way in. And then it turns out I employed a lot of the behavior of my dad to try to bring Jack to life. And so there were a lot of aspects of it that came very naturally to me because what Amit and Lucas wrote was so universally true of certainly one kind of American experience. And that is this generation that came just after World War II, that we had felt that the sense was we'd conquered evil, and in the process of doing so, we had become ingenious in creating things, and technology had developed an exponential rate. And one of the ways that we could improve people's lives are things in their household that make day-to-day chores of living easier. And so these door-to-door salesmen started to become a feature of the American landscape. And each of them, there's a great documentary called Salesman that takes place sort of in the 60s. And it shows the decline of that industry, because at the heart of it, there's really no way to achieve upward mobility being a salesman. There's death of a salesman in that sense, that this optimism that you're selling, this hope that you're selling, will never really be completed with these products. And consequently, you keep hawking products, but it's not like anything is going to catch on in a big way, because everybody is really looking for just the next small thing that they can afford. And I think a lot of the sales people became disillusioned with this version of the American dream, and became kind of tragic figures that were a symbol of, I don't know, what happens to a society that's only clutching onto things.
Yes, materialism can be the death of us all, indeed. And there's a line that your character Jack says, sometimes giving folks a new dream can make all the difference, right? You say in Hello Tomorrow as Jack.
That's right.
And this line, along with the sort of sad sales pitch that Jack gives about visiting to the moon to a confused but also moved audience, including your co-star Hank Azaria, right? Gives just one pause about Jack's real feelings and intentions. So how is Jack more than just a smarmy sales guy?
because he believes it. He believes because he feels it himself. That sense of, geez, what am I really doing with my life? Why is today so uncomfortable that I have to keep thinking about tomorrow? What is it that I've done in my life that I can't keep track of now, that is sort of catching up to me in my mind, and I'm just trying to run from it? Like, people who haven't really attended to their lives because they're so busy dreaming for tomorrow is one of the key features of Jack's life. And the way that he goes about his day is trying to sell that to people. So he spends all day really interested in people, trying to understand their problems. And that keeps him feeling like he can be an optimistic, positive force for the future. So he's never really concerned with things that go wrong, or things that other people might feel like were disingenuous or something, because he knows that that hope that he is providing to people will at least be enough to get them through the day. And, we all do that in a lot of ways. Going to church is like that, having faith. I go, on Sunday to church, put something in the tithe, and I get a beautiful story about the way it is to live, and hope for the future, and it gets you through the week. And I think Jack thinks of things like that. He's sort of he's a preacher for capitalism, and he believes that that is enough to get through a life every day dreaming of tomorrow.
Well, you do have to be a believer, whether it's in the Kool-Aid or something
He's a
else.
believer. That's what it is. He's a absolute believer, which is the thing that keeps him from getting caught up on the things that he does that, we as a viewer find questionable at times. And so hopefully that conviction is the thing that keeps drawing you in to such a complicated character.
Absolutely. And he's complicated, and you do a beautiful job with that nuance, right? Because you can really see those moments where, as a
That it
viewer,
breaks through. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's all
where
in the
he's
writing. I mean,
conflicted.
Amit and Lucas, they wrote this stuff. They choreographed it beautifully. This because it's also filled with such chaos and hijinks and hilarity, and there's a kind of mystery surrounding it, and there's family drama. They've woven together this incredible tapestry of Americana, and the design itself is enough to I think draw a kind of romantic interest into it. And they've planted on top of this incredible story with really phenomenal characters. The classic American fable.
It really is. And, I feel like you might have a little nostalgia for that 1950s, sort of design aesthetic. The show is really beautifully designed. Do you have that?
When you're around it, you can't help but be in love with it. There is something when you look at these cars and the way that they were designed, and the interest that went into trying to create a vehicle that alluded to a better future. I mean, these are that's really what was in the design. These wings on the side, and the kind of tail lamps that were on. They're not functional at all. They're aspirational. And you can't help when you're around them to feel that same kind of optimism. Then, of course, the robot that serves you beer, the beer bot at the bartender, you're going to get a beer from the robot's belly, which is super convenient, but it might have a little bit of motor oil in it. There's just just a touch, just enough to give you a buzz. But the things in this retro future world work in the same way that things work in our retro future world, which is pretty good.
Yeah, just don't be flammable, I guess, is the message. No open flame.
Yeah, exactly.
No open flame. I did notice, and I did want to talk about your co-stars a bit, because of course those are the folks who hold up the production with you, right? But you have, if I'm not mistaken, sales and politics in your family history. You've spoken a lot about your dad, but being a descendant of a congressman in North Carolina, and you talked about your dad a lot as a salesman in many things, but and actors are, of course, selling characters. So do you think sales is in your blood?
Unfortunately, I do. I think you hit the nail on the head. That's what we do as actors: sell a story. And one of the ways that you do it is you figure out what kind of audience. What does the audience want? What does your audience for Hello Tomorrow want? You try to sell them the story that Amma and Lucas have created. So we are the go-between in the same way that my dad didn't invent the products, that he was there at the doorstep trying to sell it, to letting them know why it's interesting. And that's the same thing that I'm doing with Jack. I'm giving them insight into Amit and Lucas's world, because just the act of watching a story is something it's part of the human feature. It takes us out of our lives for a second. It allows us to empathize, brings us joy, distracts us, whatever it is. And I can't help but believe that is something I inherited.
Well, you use it well. So let's talk a little bit about your cast that you worked with on the show. It's a great cast. You have Hanifa Wood, Allison Pill, and Nicholas, and of course Hank Azaria, and who cracked me up to no end in Brockmire. So, and you also have, because you and I have some swam in the soup entertainment connections, my old summer camp mate and friend Maddie Mayer. And
yes.
And we went to what I used to call hippie socialist camp with Ben Affleck. And Matt would make an appearance, and others who became more, public figures. But yeah, so that was great to see.
What was that camp?
That was Camp Thoreau in Vermont. It was for lofty, intellectual parents.
Of course it was.
Camp
Thoreau.
Camp Thoreau. There was no Walden. It was the kind of place where, and this was the 80s, you would go to breakfast in your underwear. I shouldn't say too much. There were other things that would never pass muster with our children's generation.
This is in the Reagan America.
It really was. It was, speaking of idealism, all the games were non-competitive. We built an apartheid shanty as a camp activity.
You were living in the future.
Dude, apartheid shanty town. I have a picture of myself at age 13.
Oh my gosh.
With a lanyard, with my feet up on a camp chair in front of the shanty town. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So, yeah, that New York.
Oh, I'm picturing you, Matt, there right now.
I wish it doesn't exist anymore, but it was a very unusual place. We lived in a microcosm of, progressive values, and that carried with it some interesting things. But Matt's a great guy. Had you worked with him before?
I had not, but I've known Matt's work for, a long time. If you're interested in theater at all in New York, Matt's work, and he is a superb actor that I've admired for a long time. And Doug Abel is the guy who cast this, and Doug runs a theater company in New York called the Vineyard Theater, and he is in touch with some of the hardest working, most creative and ambitious actors on the planet, and they are actors that gravitate towards interesting storytelling, and they're not worried about how it's going to be commodified. They want to tell a story wherever it is, whenever it is, if it's going to excite their imagination and do something rad. And Matt has been a part of that tribe for a long time. So Doug, who was casting this, populated this with so many actors who have that same kind of investment and intention, and the collaboration to get to work with a number of people whose only interest is creating the most original story collaboratively that we can in that moment. That's a thrill. That's the best of all worlds. And we had more than our fair share on this show of people who love that experience and want to create something novel for people.
Absolutely. And in one of your concurrent roles, you've obviously played Cory Ellison since 2019 in the morning show, and I understand you just wrapped a season of that. So, and myself as a former local news reporter, to me, your portrayal feels so right. so wrong. But yet there's something.
That's awful. I'm sorry.
Well, I could hold my own just like Reese. And so, there's something still, despite that, about Cory worth rooting for too, I think. And so do you think he is a hero or a villain?
I always love the anti-hero, and that's the character that I was thinking about earlier, seeing so many Paul Newman movies growing up. This American anti-hero was he spent a lifetime pursuing this character, and to me, there's something richly humane in that, and that you can have drama that's not so cut and dry. It's not just heroes and villains. It's people who are occasionally able to rise above their limits and fail at times and still keep trying, because that's kind of all life is, right? Is you have a moment of success where you feel like a better version of yourself than you ever could have, and then you're the flawed human that you are, and then you have to get up the next day too. So there is something to me really beautiful about that story and about that kind of character. And so Cory, to me, falls in that tradition. He is somebody who has been on the winning side for a very long time in his life, and finally has to meet some of the challenges of failure. And people don't always respond in the most heroic ways in times like that.
Absolutely. And you can even draw a parallel between Jack and Cory, perhaps, in that they both
I
share.
think so. I think they're a part of the same salesman kind of figure that is, to me, a feature of American society, and they represent that hope and optimism in a creative future for which they're responsible. That's the other thing about these kinds of characters. Jack wants to be the one to save the world. Jack wants to be the one. And why that is in his brain, I'm not entirely sure. I know in my dad, it was because his dad told him he wasn't good enough, because he thought that's the way to make him strong, and that he was a part of my grandfather fought in World War II. And, I think he thought the most loving thing I can do is toughen up my son by telling him he's not good enough. And that created a feature in my dad that he was never going to be good enough. So he had to basically win the lottery, to come home one day and be like, hey, I did okay, Dad. And I see that a lot in people. And I think that story never gets old. I think it's woven into the fabric of this country.
And is it hard to play characters that have something to prove? We do see that parallel there, is that,
Yeah, for sure. With my dad died in 2005. And, underneath all that optimism and that hope is a real reluctance to live in the present moment. And I think the reason there's a reluctance is because it's incredibly uncomfortable. There's a kind of, heartache at the bottom of it, a little bit of despair, because what if it doesn't work? Can I tolerate just being a human being? Can I tolerate just going to work and coming without this dream, without this vision of a better future? Will today be enough?
Well, there is that thesis, that road less traveled thesis, that, life is hard, and accepting that analogously is like, once you get there, which so many people are unable to do, you can move on and feel those things.
I'll never forget the moment somebody was like, hey, you should pick up The Road Less Traveled. It's a really hopeful book. And I pick it up, and the first line is life is suffering. I was like, what the heck? What?
It's a little Buddhist,
That's the solution.
It's a little Buddhist.
Yeah. I know. I was like, well, now in my 50s, trust me, I am a believer.
Did you get through more than page one? I have trouble, past page 5 or 10.
I read it all and took notes on a road trip. Actually,
perfect.
I mean, it's right on the nose, right on the nose. Me and my buddy were driving across the country. I'm reading The Road Less Traveled.
It's suffering. It's just suffering. Stuck in the car with a dude and a bunch of methane. That's it. It's suffering. Dutch oven of vehicles. All right, last question. After making Hello Tomorrow, we talked a little bit about sales and how intrinsic it is to this character. How do you feel about America and everything that we're selling here?
I'm like Jack in terms of I'm an optimist. I think the arc of human history bends towards justice. I believe that each generation how do I say this? The upswing in the next evolution of our society may be out of the reach for our generation, and maybe just for our kids to do and our grandchildren to do. And we may not get to see it, but my firm belief is you keep aspirationally reaching for a more equitable society, and a society that enriches the most people and creates the most kind of gratitude and love and all of those things, that that just the effort of reaching for it makes for a better day.
All right. Well, on that optimistic note, if you believe it or not, I believe it. And I believe that things will always get better, but with effort. So
With effort.
thank you so much for your time. I'm sure you have to go and sit. How many more hours you got?
Like, 40.
Oh,
Just an
God.
easy
So
40.
I got you like in the earlier part of the day because
You sure did.
I am psyched. Yay, winning.
This is me, high octane.
Everybody, this has been Billy Crudup. You can see his new show, Hello Tomorrow, on Apple TV Plus, premiering this Friday, February 17th. Thanks again, Billy. We'll see you again.
Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.